How's it going, everyone? This is Boots with Snapkeep Arcade, back with Spencer Howland of Constructed Criticism for another standard deck guide. This week we'll be going over Mono Blue, a deck that did extremely well at the Pro Tour. This deck also has very few rares, making it one of the easiest decks to craft on Arena. Thanks for joining us, Spencer. Why don't you start by walking us through the overall strategy of the deck?
Yeah, so Mono Blue is one of the decks that lost pretty much nothing from rotation. I actually don't even know, just kind of going over the list really quick, I don't even know if there's a card from the new set in the deck. It looks like the sideboard has, Selective Snare and Disdainful Stroke, but outside of that, the deck actually didn't lose or get anything. You have a Chemister's Insight here or there, but this is a deck that fully survived rotation, but the only thing that it lost was one of its 1-drops in the form of Slitherblade, and that's it. That's all the deck lost, and it's just kind of stuck together through rotation to allow you to just play kind of the same tempo game that you were playing before. So the overall strategy of the deck is pretty clear. The best card in the deck by a pretty substantial margin is Curious Obsession. Your goal with Curious Obsession is to put it on one of your flyers or one of your unblockable creatures. So you have 4 Mist-Cloaked Herald, 4 the Siren Stormtamer. Your goal is to really put it on one of those 1-drops and just chip in and get through. You can also put it on your flyer like Warkite Marauder or Tempest Djinn, but you really want to put it on one of your evasive threats and just grind them out with card advantage and then protect your creatures with Spell Pierce, Wizard's Retort, and Dive Down throughout the game.
All right, let's go over the creatures in the deck.
So in this list in the main deck, we have 4 Mist-Cloaked Herald, 4 Siren Stormtamer, 4 Merfolk Trickster, 2 Warkite Marauder, and 4 Tempest Djinn. You can play some Exclusion Mage in the main if you want. I know that the deck that did well at the Pro Tour did that, and that's totally fine. You definitely want this core set of creatures first before you start adding others, though. These are the most important ones. The main creatures that you kind of care about are your Tempest Djinns. They're your big beefy things that are going to kill your opponent most of the time. And then the other things are your Siren Stormtamers, because they actually act as spells and as evasive threats for your Curious Obsessions. Warkite Marauders is something that's really good in the deck. It's kind of funny because this card is like probably one of my favorite cards from Ixalan. Anytime that I ever opened a Warkite Marauder in Ixalan draft, I immediately just drafted blue-red. It was my favorite deck by a lot. Like, that's how powerful the card was, and it's no different in this. It just gets things out of the way for your creatures, making even your Merfolk Tricksters be able to attack in more often. It's really, really powerful. That ability to remove things from combat against you is just going to allow you to get in big chunks of demo and really swing the tempo of the game into your favor as you get to attack, and your opponent, they can attack back because you're attacking with these things, but it's almost too late for them at that point, especially when you can protect your stuff really easily with spells, and they probably can. Merfolk Trickster's the worst card in the deck, but it's kind of necessary because it's a wizard. So you want to maximize the number of wizards that you're playing for Wizard's Retort so that you get to play straight up counterspell in your deck. But Merfolk Trickster still is pretty good at coming down, tapping something down to continue that tempo game for you. Removing abilities. Even today, I was playing against this deck on Arena, and they flashed this down to remove the power boost from my Get2 Lava Runner, and then we're able to freely block that Get2 Lava Runner and then attack back, which was really powerful. So it does a lot. It kind of is just enough good stuff to make up a card. I call this the theory of words. When a card has so many interesting words on it that it turns out to be playable even though it's not that good. I think that the main thing to think about is the number of creatures that you want in your main deck. This list has 18. I know the lists have gone up to 20. It kind of just depends on your spell slots. For this list, we have an extra Sleep and an extra Essence Scatter in the main deck, and there's a few reasons for this. One of the main reasons is the number of total creatures being played right now is pretty high, and you play a lot of creature mirror matches. Because of that, I want the best cards in the creature mirror matches for my deck, and those cards are Sleep and Essence Scatter. Sleep is probably one of the best cards for this deck, period. A very large portion of the games that you win are just because you sleep your opponent and attack them twice and they die. It's almost like a blue damnation, one-sided damnation in this deck that's really powerful. Just kind of clears your opponent's board for 2 turns, and you get to freely attack for 2 turns, and you don't have to worry about them attacking back. It's really powerful in that way.
Awesome. So let's go over the other spells in the deck.
Yeah, so you have a little bit of card advantage in the form of Charted Course. So because you're playing so many 1-drop creatures, right? You have those 8 1-drop creatures, plus the Warkite Marauders, plus the Merfolk Tricksters can get in there pretty early too. You're able to just activate Charted Course really easily. Some of the lists that you might have seen, they might not be playing that Essence Scatter. They might be playing a 3rd Charted Course because it really does give you that card advantage. Curious Obsession is still the most important spell in the deck. I think that the worst spell in the deck by a pretty substantial margin is Opt. You're really just playing it as air. are in the deck and something to do with your mana because you're protecting your creatures with things like Spell Pierce and Dive Down, and Opt allows you to use that mana. But it's another reason that you'll see maybe 2 Chemister's Insight in the 75s of some of these decks is because you want to be able to use your mana when you don't need to protect your creatures.
Let's go over the different matchups with the deck.
So different games are going to be about different things. So for example, against Mono Red, your game is actually about protecting your Tempest Djinns and just having as many of them on the board as possible. So you just want to protect your life total until you draw at least 2 of them, and then you have the biggest things on boards that you can protect with things like Dive Down, and then you'll sweep your opponent and win the game that way. Otherwise, Mono Red can be a rough matchup. Against control decks, you want to jam things as quickly as possible and then protect the things with Wizard's Retort, right? If I can go Mist-Cloaked Herald into Curious Obsession against control, I'm going to draw so many more cards than them throughout that game that it's going to be really easy for me to win. And then if you look at things like Golgari and some of the mid-range decks, it's really going to be about protecting your creatures from their removal packages. So you're going to try and tempo them out. And that's when the sideboard comes in with things like Exclusion Mage, Disdainful Stroke, different things like that.
Why don't you tell us about the sideboard?
Yeah, so I actually am not going to lie. I took this sideboard directly and changed maybe 1 or 2 cards from the list that top 8'd the Grand Prix not too long ago. That was in the hands of Gabriel Nassif. I kind of just trust him here. He played the deck a ton on stream. Selective Snare is an interesting one where you're able to really help you in things like the Boros matchup or the White Weenie matchup by targeting all their humans, returning those to them their hand. That's going to win you the game a large percentage of the time because you're going to tax their mana while you're continuing to attack them. It's like another sleep in the deck. Sleep is another one that we already mentioned is so good, so you play more of those. And then Exclusion Mage is going to be there to beat decks that try and play like 4-drops against you. If a deck's trying to win with a 4 or 5 mana creature, Exclusion Mage is there to be like, no, like those don't get to be in play. We're going to play this game far under that mana cost, and I'm going to win because my card's the most mana efficient. So Entrancing Melody is one that I've boarded in a few times. This is another one kind of like Exclusion Mage, where you can kind of just say, okay, the game went a little bit longer than I wanted. Let's make the game about taking the thing that you're trying to make the game about and make it mine instead. Because one of the ways that you want to win with tempo decks is by controlling the board and controlling the spells that are either on the stack or that are trying to interact with you at better mana costs. Entrancing Melody doesn't do that. That's one of the few cards in the whole 75 where you're down on card advantage. You're down on tempo, I should say. You're not actually down on card advantage. This is one of the plus card advantage cards in the deck where you're taking a creature from your opponent, giving you a creature that you would have spent that mana on, and then you're basically killing their creature for the 2 mana that it would cost, for the 2 blue mana, right? So for 2 blue mana, I get to kill your creature and cast the same creature is basically what it does. So it is a tempo positive play, and that's why it's in the 75, but it's very different than the other things you're going to try and do that are going to be under mana cost and not over mana cost.
How about Chemister's Insight?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned how some lists might play 2 of those. I find this to be pretty good in any matchup where you're trying to like play Wizard's Retort. So like if you want to beat some of the control decks and the games are specifically about your counter spells, that's when Chemister's Insight is going to be at its all-time high.
The one of Diamond Mare stands out to me. Tell us about its inclusion in the sideboard.
Yeah, so some of these lists play a lot more of these. So one of the things that people worry about with this deck is the mono red matchup. So if you're able to play a Diamond Mare, which is already a 1/3 that's pretty good at blocking the mono red player's stuff, and then you're just able to gain a ton of life throughout the game by naming blue, and then every time you cast a spell you gain a life, it's pretty powerful. I think that the main rest of the stuff is just kind of the counter spell package. You have 2 Disdainful Stroke, 1 Essence Scatter, and 1 Negate, and you're just trying to bring in the most cost-effective counter spells against decks, increasing your tempo even more than you already have in your main deck.
Do you have any tips and tricks with the deck?
Yeah, I kind of said some stuff about a couple of matchups, and I think those all hold true. Understanding what your role is in a game is probably the most important thing that you can do with this deck, regardless of whether you're playing this list, maybe you're playing the list from the Pro Tour that went 10-0. I think that understanding what is my role in this matchup right now is far more important than what is my deck trying to do. If there's ever a deck that believes in the philosophy of who's the beatdown right now, it's always going to be a tempo deck. Like, that's the most important thing to them every time. Are you supposed to be playing the control deck, or are you supposed to be playing the aggro deck right now and then playing accordingly?
Tell us where this deck currently sits in the meta.
Yeah, so I'd like to kind of start with how it actually did at the Pro Tour, which is really interesting. So the deck did 10-0 at the Pro Tour, meaning that it was either 2 or 3 decks that actually had a perfect record and constructed. However, the deck's conversion rate overall from day 1 to day 2 was pretty low. Now, that can depend on what those players' draft records were, because the Pro Tour is a multi-format event. However, one of the things that, if you've ever played this deck, is the games where you go off with Curious Obsession you almost always win. Like, there's just not a better deck in Standard than Mono Blue when a Curious Obsession is active and going. It is actually the best deck in Standard when that's happening. The problem is that when it's not happening, the deck actually is significantly worse. You'll see one of the things that I did is I played more Sleeps, because you can make the game about that card. You know, I played an Essence Scatter so that you can, you know, continue to tempo them and just make sure your tempo game is good. When this deck is good, it's actually really, really good. But when the deck kind of, I mean, you're playing so many bad creatures and so many bad cards that it's really hard to be like the most consistent deck in Standard, which this deck is not. This is a metagame deck that you want to play when the metagame is right, when people aren't expecting it, and when you can take advantage of things. And right now, that could be true of this deck. This deck is having an uptick on MTGO. This deck did well at the Pro Tour, and people might not be ready for this right now, and it could be something you want to check out.
And finally, how do you beat this deck?
Yeah, I think the best way to beat this deck is to bolt the bird concept. If they play a 1-drop creature and you have a 1-drop removal spell, don't wait for them to untap. You know, one of the common things in Magic that you're taught is, you know, wait till the last second to cast your instant spells if you can. That's not true against this deck. They have so many ways to interact with the things that you're trying to do with their creatures, whether it's Siren Stormtamer, Dive Down, or Spell Pierce. You should just be killing their creatures on the spot when you can, and really understanding, like, taxing their dive downs and things like that, especially when it comes to their Tempest Djinns. The way that you're going to lose to this deck is you're going to lose to Tempest Djinn attacking you 3 times, or you're going to lose to the card advantage of Curious Obsession. So it's your job to not let them make the game about those cards. This deck is actually really fun, though. If you're looking for something that's actually competitive and really, really inexpensive on MTG Arena, this is just a great go-to deck.
Thank you so much to Spencer Howland of Constructed Criticism. Make sure to subscribe to his channel and his podcasts for more in-depth insights into competitive Magic. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to Snapkeep Arcade and turn on notifications so you get notified whenever I upload a new video. This has been Boots with Snapkeep Arcade. Thanks for watching.